Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next lecture on the ism and the artist. We're going to take a look at Hokusai today, who is the Japanese artist associated with ukiyo-e art that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. So on we go. Now, Hokusai was a Japanese artist, an ukiyo painter and printmaker of the Edo period. He was born in Edo, which is now Tokyo. Starting as a young child, he continued to work and improve his style until his death. In a long and successful career, he produced over 30,000 paintings, sketches, woodblock prints, and images for picture books in total. Kind of amazing. Innovative in his compositions and exceptional in his drawing technique, Hokusai is considered one of the greatest masters in art history. So really kind of amazing, and certainly one of the greatest artists in Japanese history. So his date of birth is unclear, but is often thought to be the 31st of October, 1760. He was born to an artisan family in the Katsushika district of Edo. His childhood name was Tokitaro. It is believed that his father was the mirror maker for the shogun. Now, his father never made Hokusai an heir, so it was thought that perhaps his mother was a concubine. So Hokusai began painting around age 6, perhaps learning from his father, whose work included, again, the painting of designs around mirrors. Now, Hokusai was known by at least 30 names during his lifetime. Now, while the use of multiple names was quite typical in Japanese artists, his number of pseudonyms really exceeds any of that of any other major Japanese artist. His name changes are so frequent that they were often related to his artistic production and would often break up the different artistic periods throughout his artistic career. So if we go back to last time, I just wanted to bring this illustration back really quick. Hokusai would have been considered the eshi here, or the painter. And probably was a lot of the Hanmoto as well, kind of the producer of everything, but he would have been considered the eshi in those terms. So in this first period, he was dubbed Shunro by his master, and it was under this name that he published his first series of prints, a series of pictures of kabuki actors published in 1779. During the decade he worked in Shunsho's studio, Hokusai was married to his first wife, about whom very little is known, except for she passed away in the early 1790s. He married again in 1797, though she passed away as well. But he did father 2 sons and 3 daughters with these 2 wives. And his youngest daughter, A, or E.I. is her name, actually became an artist and his assistant. And so this print we see here, Fireworks in the Cool Evening at Ryogoku Bridge, really dates from this period of Hokusai's life. And really, when all of his works that we see are really all going to be pretty much images around Edo or Tokyo, Edo as it was called at the time. So a very familiar area to him. So he's just painting what he sees and all this. And so here we see these, again, people probably promenading after dinner. Whoops. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Upon the death of Shunsho in 1793, Hokusai began exploring other styles of art, including European styles he was exposed to through French and Dutch copper engravings he was able to acquire. So he was looking to Europe very much as Europe would be looking to Japan. He was soon expelled from the Katsukawa Shul by Shunko, the chief disciple of Shunsho, possibly due to his studies at a rival school. The event was, in Hokusai's own words, inspirational. He said, "What really motivated the development of my artistic style was the embarrassment I suffered at Shunko's hands." So kind of one of those things that something bad happens, but it's the impetus onto something good. So Hokusai also changed the subjects of his artworks at this time, moving away from the images of courtesans and actors that were really the original traditional subject of ukiyo-e. Instead, his work became of landscapes and images of the daily life of Japanese people on a variety of societal levels. This change of subject was a breakthrough in ukiyo-e and also in Hokusai's career. Now, the next period saw Hokusai's association with the Tawareu school and the adoption of the name Tawareu Sori. He produced many brush paintings called Soronomi and illustrations during this time. In 1798, Hokusai passed his name on to a pupil and set out as an independent artist. So something quite different for us, passing on your name for an artist and leaving that kind of style there. He then set out as this independent artist. He was free from ties to any school, and for the first time adopted the name of Hokusai Tomisa. By 1800, Hokusai was further developing the use of his ukiyo-e for purposes other than portraiture. He had also adopted the name he would most widely be known as, which was Katsushika Hokusai. And he was actually born in Katsushika. So that's how that connection came there. Kind of like Leonardo da Vinci. He was born in Vinci, and so he's Leonardo of Vinci instead of taking his father's last name. And that year he produced 2 collections of landscapes, famous sites of the Eastern capital, and 8 views from Edo, one of which we see here. He also began to attract students of his own, eventually teaching 50 pupils over the course of his life. So kind of neat that he's teaching and instructing, or teaching and working for himself as an artist at the same time. So he became increasingly famous over the next decade, both due for his artwork and also his self-promotion, talent for self-promotion. During a Tokyo festival in 1904, he created a portrait of the Buddhist priest Daruma, said to be 600 feet long, using a broom and buckets of ink. So you can see on the illustration of the right, kind of all the crowd is there gathered around, looking to see what he's doing. And this is actually a modern portrayal of what the portrait might have looked like. So there was another story about him, talking about self-promotion, places him in the court of the shogun, and he was invited there to compete with another artist who practiced more traditional brush stroking. Hokusai's painting was created in front of the shogun, and it consisted of a painting of a blue curve on paper. And then he chased a chicken across it after he had dipped the chicken's feet into red paint. So it had all these flutter marks going across the blue curve. He described the painting to the shogun as a landscape showing the Tatsuta River with red maple leaves floating in it. And Hokusai won the competition. So kind of a great story there. In 1807, Hokusai began collaborating with the popular novelist Takizawa Bakin on a series of illustrated books. The two did not get along well due to artistic differences, and their collaboration ended. The publisher, giving a choice between Bakin or Hokusai, opted to keep Hokusai, emphasizing the importance of illustrations in printed works of the period. So in 1811, at the age of 51, Hokusai changed his name to Taito and entered the period in which he created the Hokusai manga and various etahan, or art manuals. So he was creating art manuals for students to study. These really began with quick lessons in simplified drawing and kind of served as a convenient way to make money and attract more students. The first book of Hokusai's manga, sketches or characters, that influenced the modern form of comics about the same era. And this was published in 1814. So Hokusai was actually one of really the precursors to the Japanese comics that it becomes so familiar today and also quite popular. Together, his 12 volumes of manga, published before 1820, and 3 more published posthumously, included thousands of drawings of animals, religious figures, and everyday people. They often have humorous overtones and were very popular at the time. And so again, he was kind of, this was a book that was just written recently, doing this one of Hokusai's illustrations on the top and another manga illustration, or which is Japanese for comics, on the bottom. And again, these manuals just provide simplified examples of different subjects such as plants, animals, human figures that an amateur might like to draw. And they often broke them down into their very basic shapes like circles and triangles, etc. And this is really an approach that is still used in art instruction today. And I actually use that myself with several students and myself too. So in 1820, Hokusai changed his name yet again, this time to Litsu, a change which marked the start of a period in which he secured his fame as an artist throughout Japan. So given Japan's isolation at this time, he did really not become famous outside of Japan until after his death. I think when Captain Cook sailed in there. We'll get to that a little bit later. It was during the 1820s that Hokusai reached the peak of his career. His most famous work, 36 Views of Mount Fuji, including the great famous Kanagawa wave, dated from this period. It proved so popular that Hokusai later added 10 more prints to the series. Among others, another series of prints he published at this time was a tour of the waterfalls of the provinces and unusual views of celebrated bridges in the provinces. So, so while being a fantastic artist, he's also showing off where he lives. He's very proud of the beauty of Japan and of Edo. And so it's kind of this whole combination that really comes together for him. You know, it's kind of this magical thing that, and so people around Japan have been wanting to travel. And so as they go to travel, they are collecting all these different playbills, kind of as their souvenirs. So really kind of cool. And here it is, the Great Wave off of Kanagawa. It is the first in his series for the 36 Views of Mount Fuji. And again, he created them as a response to a domestic travel boom, but also he was pretty obsessed with Mount Fuji himself, having it been around there. This really secured his fame, both in Japan and overseas. As historian Richard Lane concludes, indeed, if there is one work that made Hokusai's name, both in Japan and abroad, it must be this monumental print series. So really kind of a phenomenal thing that happened. So the image we look at, we see this big wave that kind of looks like it's threatening these three different boats while Mount Fuji rises behind it. Some thought that this wave might be considered a tsunami, but more than likely just pretty much a rogue wave that was there. And again, this series was considered to be his masterpiece. At first, the images were largely printed in blue, and it was a very special Prussian blue that had just been introduced. So, you know, again, using all these new and different techniques. But after its success was assured, then he started to release the prints in multicolors, which we see here. Take still a little bit more look at it. So we see the mountain in the back, that is snow-capped Mount Fuji, which in Japan is considered sacred and is a symbol of national identity. So something very important. It is also considered a symbol of beauty. It is an iconic figure in many Japanese representations of famous places, and as in the same case with this series here. The dark color around Mount Fuji seems to indicate that the scene occurs early in the morning with the sun rising from behind the observer, illuminating the mountain's snowy peak. We see cumulonimbus clouds seem to be hanging in the sky between the viewer and Mount Fuji. But really there's no rain to be seen either here or on Mount Fuji itself, which kind of appears cloudless because we can see it all the way through there. And again, in the scene here, we can see the three different fast boats. I'll try to pronounce them, Oshikori Bune, and they were actually used to transport live fish from the peninsulas to the markets of Edo Bay or Tokyo Bay. So really kind of beautiful when you start to take a look at all these. And again, I highly encourage you to go take a look at all of these prints because there's so much in there. And of course, on the upper left there, we do see his signature as well. And this was the second print that we see here, and this was called Find Wind, Clear Morning. And this is really one that really zeroes in just on Mount Fuji itself. So many of them, they kind of becomes the background for it. And so just kind of fascinating to see how it is. And we see the clouds behind there as well. Just a little bit of snow. So kind of looks like one of the, certainly a summer day. And I have a few more views of it. We won't look at all 36, unfortunately. This one here and in the Surugaido in Edo, again, we see Mount Fuji in the background. And these are just travelers or workers on the road. So these could be tourists that are going along the way here. And we see the beautiful house on the right and Mount Fuji in the background there. So again, it's just fascinating if you just sit and look at them and look at the colors, because we know how long it took to do these prints. And just the delicate nature of the people and the trees is really amazing. Here's one of his snowy mountain, snowy morning at Koishikawa. You can almost feel the cold in that sky there, really gets that ice blue sky in there. Again, this is another district of Tokyo. And in this area now is the botanical gardens and also the other gardens in Karaku are very close to this in modern day Tokyo. And so in this woodblock print from a tea house balcony, a waitress points out Fuji to a group of visitors. The rectangular porch in which they're enclosed kind of functions as a picture within a picture. Kind of a smaller isolated composition that could stand on its own, but kind of critical to the viewer's experience, because if you were a tourist purchasing that, you would almost want to see yourself looking out at Mount Fuji, because this is kind of the scene when you see. So kind of like a postcard is actually what it's doing. And so, and her pointing really leads us right to Mount Fuji. I think we have one more. So this bridge, the Nihonbashi Bridge, was said to have been built in 1603 at the order of the Tokugawa Ieyasu. The next year, it was made the starting point of the Gokaido, or the 5 major roads, and really became the symbol of the prosperous city of Edo, now Tokyo, which was the center of Japan. So very important indeed here. The Kirin, so I had a picture of another thing in there, but again, you see just these ideas of everyday life of what everyone is going through. So imagine even you're walking through the canals of Venice, kind of the same thing here. See the fishermen there and bringing their wares to market as well. So just kind of this everyday life. And then of course, on the back left there, we do see Mount Fuji, which just, continues to dominate all of his series. So he did other series as well at this time. He also did the tour of the waterfalls, which we saw. And he also began producing a number of detailed individual images of flowers and birds. And they were extremely intricate. And here we see his poppies, which are quite beautiful. So kind of this very close up view, instead of seeing that whole landscape thing. So again, he's just focusing on the nature of Japan, but it still has everything to do with kind of showing off this pride in his country and what is surrounding them. And I love this one here. This is the flock of chickens. And it's just kind of magical to see all the feathers weaving in and out. And imagine when they were carving that woodblock, getting all those different feathers, and the faces even look kind of individual with the eyes and the way they have all the coloring in there. It's just beautiful. And this is another one of his chrysanthemums. Now, chrysanthemums were actually imported from China in the 8th or 9th century and had really been a really big motif for Japanese poets, painters, and textile designers. The imperial family adopted the chrysanthemum as its official emblem. Hokusai, interestingly, paired his chrysanthemums with a common horsefly that we see there on the upper left, perhaps implying his independence from this royal history of the chrysanthemum. But again, another one of these really close-up views. And this kind of leads us over to Europe for a really quick jump. We kind of start to see the intersection here with the Impressionists so many years after he had painted it. So again, we see the chrysanthemum print there on the upper left. And then right below that is actually Claude Monet's version of the chrysanthemums. He had actually owned Hokusai's woodcut since 1896, and it was a direct influence on his picture for it. And one of the things that became known with Monet, particularly in his later period, was being spatially undefined. And I think we can see that direct influence from Japanese prints, and in particular from Hokusai. So as we then go and look over there at his water lilies, again, we know they are water lilies, but if we didn't know that, we might not know what they are. But this idea of not knowing where they really sit in space, because we see no horizon line, as we don't in either of the other two pictures as well. No other plants to ground it or buildings or anything like that, just focusing on the nature itself. So Hokusai really had quite an influence on the Impressionists, and just as kind of a quick little look at it, but it's just these views of a different way to look at nature is how they were influenced by, that they really hadn't seen in their own European art. Now, in the postscript to his work, Hokusai writes, "From around the age of 6, I had the habit of sketching from life. I became an artist, and from 50 on began producing works that won some reputation, but nothing I did before the age of 70 was worth any attention. At 73, I began to grasp the structures of birds and beasts, insects and fish, and of the way plants grow. If I go on trying, I will surely understand them better by the time I'm at 86, so that by 90, I will have penetrated to their essential nature. At 100, I may well have a positively divine understanding of them, while at 130, 40, or more, I will have reached the stage where every dot and every stroke I paint will be alive. May heaven that grants long life give me the chance to prove that this is no lie." So this is certainly someone who wanted to, we know he was so prolific with 30,000 paintings, and certainly wanted to keep painting and wanted to keep growing and learning until he could completely perfect his art. Really just amazing artist when we take a look at that. So before his death, though, unfortunately in 1839, a disaster struck as a fire destroyed most of Hokusai's studio and much of his work. By this time, his career was beginning to wane, as there was a younger artist, particularly Hiroshige, was becoming increasingly popular, as happens with artists. But Hokusai never stopped painting, and he completed this one, Ducks in a Stream, at the age of 87. And still, again, here, just kind of getting very abstract. And that whole idea of even what Monet was doing is there's a horizon line, and because the ducks are probably swimming on the water because we don't see their feet, but just kind of interesting as to where it is. So again, constantly seeking to produce better work, he apparently exclaimed on his deathbed, "If only heaven will give me just another 10 years, just another 5 more years, then I could become a real painter." He died on April 18th, 1849, and was buried in Tokyo at the age of 88. Now, a short 4 years after Hokusai's death, it was an American fleet led by Admiral Perry, not Cook, sailed into Tokyo Bay and forced Japan to open its arms to the West. And so Hokusai's career had spanned this entire age of Japanese history, but with the introduction of the West into Japan is when he would really become very famous and well-known outside of Japan. So I hope you've enjoyed this look at Hokusai, just an amazing Japanese artist. And I hope you get a chance to look at some of his other works because they're just fascinating. So thank you very much. Arigato.